from day-to-day workload. They are also loading, so weekends or say whenever there are holidays, so they move into the particular areas to see the wilderness and get calmness in the area from the daily schedule. So biodiversity, or what you call diversity in life, is one of the most intriguing or interesting questions, or say part of question in everyone's life. Say, for instance, how many species are there, and where they live, what are the methods to basically quantify them. So these are the basic questions, but still there is no definite answer for this. That's how many species are existing on the earth, because there are many species which have not yet been listed. Although taxonomists who classify organisms, they are in work for the last 250 years, and about 1.2 million species, flora, fauna, have so far been categorized, or you can say cataloged, which is available in central database. But there are many more species which still remain to be discovered, and people believe that about 86 percent of the total flora and fauna on the earth, that is the terrestrial outside water bodies, it still needs to be typified, or it still needs to be categorized, or you can say cataloged. And similarly, about 91% of the fauna or flora in marine environments, or you can say marine waters, sea water, that still also remains to be discovered. So it is very interesting, and say diversity of, say if there is no diversity of things, diversity in life, then perhaps life would have been very, very monotonous. So it is basically one aspect, diversity, which basically makes us interesting, that we see so much of diversity in language, in culture, in when we move across landscapes, across different states, we come across different kind of diversity. So diversity is a very important, integral part, or you can say intriguing part. Now, as far as the total species is concerned, it is very difficult. Now, why there is no conclusive answer is that the work is limited. Not many people have tried to list the species, because it's difficult. It is difficult, and generally the methods which the modelers, or what you call as the extrapolations, through modeling. Extrapolations means that diversity of a particular area is known, and then it is tried to be extrapolated to rest of the areas. So there are many assumptions in doing this. So therefore, the conclusions drawn are very confusing. So that's why we don't have no definite answer to the total number of species present in the world or present in India. But still, taxonomy is based on the maximum, or say what you call as the highest level of classification, like say a species belonging to a particular phylum, a species belonging to a particular class, particular order, particular family, particular species, genus. So based on this, large holistic, or you can say larger groups of classifications, classification. In India, it has been found that there are about 99,701 species till date. 99,701 species till date. So they are largely, most of them belonging to insects. Let's say, for instance, 77% of these 99,701 species, they belong to insects. So insects are the largest basically group, not only in India, but in the rest of the world also. As far as the large vertebrates, mammalian species is concerned, there are about 440 species of mammals in India. As far as the birds, 1,346 species of birds. And as far as the reptiles, which include snakes, lizards, turtles, etc., the number of species goes to 706 in India. And amphibians, it goes to 443 species. And among vertebrates, or what we call as the which have vertebral column, the species have the largest number, which is 3,496 species. So among vertebrates, fish has the largest or highest diversity in India, comprising more than 3,000 species. Okay, so that is basically a snapshot of the total number of taxa, major groupings which are found in India. And most of these vertebrates, especially the large species, they are experiencing huge pressures, biotic pressures, human pressures all over the country, not only in protected area, not only in, outside protected areas, but even in protected areas such as national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, community reserves, conservation reserves, tiger reserves, elephant reserves. No, all here the species, they are not safe actually. Both plants and animals, they are experiencing several threats every day. And recently, a few days back, only last week, there was a no very important article which appeared in PANAS, that is National Academy of Sciences in US, very prestigious journal there. The statistics has come that large number of species are going to be extinct by 2050 if the pressures, biotic pressures, if they are not curtailed, if they are not prevented, then a large number of species will disappear soon. The reasons are basically people. We are all behind this, that people are disappearing because of activities, human mediated activities all over. Now, protected areas are basically the conservation areas, which are established either on land or water. And here, the exploitation of the resources is prohibited or it is limited. If it is there, it is limited. No, it is not like you work or you basically grow and then harvest resources in your private land, private lands, protected areas. There are restrictions, so many restrictions, especially national parks and tiger reserves. No one is allowed, but still, India is a growing country, developing nation. The population is major problem here. Even in tiger reserves, we say that tiger reserves are safe, and there are about 1,17,000 people who are residing right inside the tiger reserves. Although no one is allowed to go in tiger reserve, but there are already people present there. More than 1 lakh people who are residing within the tiger reserves, and same is true for several national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, that people since ages they are living there. But earlier, when population was low, it was not much a problem. Now, because of increase in population, the pressures, because of these communities who are living right inside these protected areas, that is national park, wildlife sanctuaries, and other tiger reserves and elephant reserves, their population is now increased, so the pressures are more, and therefore the people or biologists who are basically studying these taxa or species, they are experiencing that these people are now causing problems. So government is planning to rehabilitate them outside, give them incentives, land and some seed money, and resettle them outside. But people have started demanding more and more. So that is where the problem starts. Now, it cannot be done in one go. No, there are so many people living in protected areas, and they cannot all be rehabilitated in just one go. So it has to be done in a phased manner, say one shift, then second shift, third shift. So it is a complicated, lot of money is involved, and now people have moved, gone to national, international human rights commission, that we have been living for so long here. So why now we are being expelled from these areas? Anyway, so it's a complicated issue. It is difficult in the current scenario to protect or say give more protection to the existing protected areas. And if you look. In 1980s, when people started working on species or say wildlife in India more seriously, the total protected area percentage in India was 4.8%, which from 80s now has gone to 5.28%. So not significant increase in population in the protected area network, but still it has been increased because there is no space where these protected areas they can be declared, and no divide of human beings. So, but still, nevertheless, although it is significant increase, but still from 4.8 in 1980s to 5.28 is a change wherein or due to which many protected areas have been added to the existing network of PAs.
सर आवाज आ रही है, थोड़ा आराम से सर प्लीज।
हाँ जी, क्या
थोड़ा फास्ट आराम से प्लीज।
ओके, ठीक है। Now, this is not a significant, मतलब जो increase हुआ है इसमें particular areas में बहुत ज़्यादा significant नहीं है 4.8 से 5.28 लेकिन फिर भी बहुत सारे नए protected area इसमें add कर दिए गए हैं. Many of them are very small teeny areas and rarely there's a area which has recently been added and which is large in size. So most of them they are small in size, like say recently in Chhattisgarh, new tiger reserve was added. Similarly, in Uttar Pradesh, Eastern UP, in Chitrakoot district, there was a Ranipur tiger reserve, which has been recently in last year declared, and it has been added to. So that is the 53rd tiger reserve in India now, Ranipur tiger reserve in Chitrakoot district in Eastern UP, where perhaps there are only 5-6 tigers, but there's a link with adjacent population, so it has been protected anyway. So that is the story of the tiger, or say tiger reserve in India. And there is more tiger reserve in Chhattisgarh, which is known as Guru Ghasidas Tiger Reserve, which has been declared in 2023, perhaps in April, and still, but it has not been gazetted. So that will be the 54th tiger reserve. Existing, there are 53. So these areas they receive no protection because of some recognized values, no natural, ecological, and geomorphological, representation of a particular area and cultural values. So that is why they are declared as protected areas, and threats there are more. So it is better that declare such area which is very rich, extremely rich in endemic species and flora and fauna. So therefore, protect them. And the major purpose of declaring these networks network of protected area is across landscapes is to conserve the biological diversity or to conserve the biological values of the nation, right? Because they contribute to natural heritage despite contributing to economy also of the country significantly, like say timber selling, then fish, prawn culture. They are all biological sources, and they contribute significantly to the economy of the country. At present, there are more than 2 lakh protected areas world over, and which cover nearly 20 million square kilometers. 20 MSK is 20 million square kilometers, and covering 15% of the world's terrestrial and marine areas. As far as the statistics is concerned, the conservation planning is based on philosophy of identifying, protecting, and protecting representative habitats. No, if you have pine forest, if you have sal forest, several patches, so then at least conserve or preserve means give protection to some representative part of the sal forest, so that in future it can serve as a reference site. No? Because there are so many disturbances going on, and if your sal forest particularly, UP is very rich in sal forest, all Tarai area in Uttar Pradesh, then in northeast it goes up to Assam. The entire Tarai belt is extremely rich in biological diversity. There are many endemic species. Sal forest is one key basically forest type which is there in the Tarai area, and UP has for country's finest sal forests, like say in Budwa or say Corbett. Corbett is not in UP, it is in Uttarakhand now. And if you go to Katanya Ghat, one of the finest sal forests are there. In sal timber is sold at very expensive rate in national and international markets. Okay, so that is the beauty and that is the significance of protecting these areas. And overall, we have 998 protected areas till date, out of which 106 are national parks, 567 are wildlife sanctuaries, 220 are community reserves, and 105 are the conservation reserves. Conservation reserves and community reserves, they are the recently added categories of protected areas to the existing protected areas, which are basically controlled by which are as per Indian Wildlife Protection Act. So Indian Wildlife Protection Act has included these two categories, that is community reserves and conservation reserves, recently in 2005 in the already existing categories of protected areas like national park, wildlife sanctuary, tiger reserves, elephant reserves. So there are 53 tiger reserves and 33 elephant reserves all over the country, spreading over. No tiger reserve, they spread over 18 states, and elephant reserves in 14 states in the country. And India has the highest population of tigers in the world, and nearly 70% of the world's tigers, they exist in India. So that is why there is so much high hue and cry for protecting tigers in India. A lot of international funding coming for conserving tigers because the maximum population resides in India. Now, this is the geographical classification of India, biographical classification of India, which is divided into 10 biographic zones, starting from Trans-Himalayas, say this blue shade on the north, and then the Himalayas, then this brownish Himalayas, then we have this desert. Yellow is desert biographic zone, then this one is semi-desert, then this is the Gangetic Plain where Aligarh or this AMU we are basically based, that is the Indo-Gangetic Plain, and then we have this largest, which covers nearly 43 to 45% of the geographical area, that is the Deccan Plateau, Pathar jise bolte hain. And on the western side, you see this reddish tinge, basically, dissected plateau ranging from or extending from somewhere south of Gujarat, that is River Tapi, and going up to Cape Combin in Tamil Nadu. So that is the Western Ghats, what you call as Sayadri. That is again one of the most important, or you can say, biodiversity hotspot of the world. It is listed in the world map of biodiversity hotspots, and there are so many endangered and endemic species of flora and fauna which exists in Western Ghats, and it is highly fragmented, highly threatened. The entire forest range is evergreen forest formation largely. Largely, it is comprised of evergreen, semi-evergreen forest types, and the plateau or this Sayadri or mountains are highly fragmented because of again, human interference, so many tea plantations, coffee plantations, rubber plantations, cardamom, and so many, all these spices which we use in North India, they all come from Western Ghats or this, especially Kerala and Tamil Nadu states. So because of these human-mediated activities, and also on top of that, there are several hydroelectric dams also here. There are about 21 rivers which originate from Western Ghats, and they supply water to the entire Deccan Plateau. But many of them, they are ephemeral, seasonal, and because of this, that is why the Western Ghats is in limelight always, significant part. And then lastly, the last biographic zone is the Northeast India, which is basically the 7 sister states, which comprise, and this is also one of the richest area in biological diversity, and it is listed as biodiversity hotspot of the world. And Northeast India has been described as the gateway of biodiversity to India. After separating from Gondwana landmass, after separating from the mainlands, basically got attached to through Northeast India. So all the species, they migrated through Northeast India to the rest of the country. So that is why, initially, when there were not resources, but not a limitation, not a problem. So many species, they basically find this area significant useful. So they stayed here in early stages of evolution, or say early history of origin of flora and fauna. So all these species, they stayed there. So that is why Northeast India is referred as the gateway of biodiversity or gateway of biological diversity, and very rich in diversity. Anyway, so we. So these are the this is a map which shows the small teeny areas which are basically protected areas, national park, wildlife sanctuary, tiger reserve, elephant reserves, community reserves, conservation reserves. They are all basically well spread all over the country. You see here in the western part, that is desert area, here there are few only, and but rest of the country, they are very well spread. Although many of them, they are more than more than 40%, they are very small in size, no, say few square kilometer only. There are very few areas where you have no a large significant area, or say where viable populations of species of flora and fauna they can be harbored. Now, viable populations are basically no viable population generally is a term which is used by biologists. Viable populations are the basically number of individuals of plants or animals which can survive for 100 years despite all changes which are happening in the area. So that is what a viable population is. Viable population means the minimum number of animals or plants of a population which can survive for 100 years in spite of all existing no, forces, all existing perturbances or disturbances which are happening all over the country, all over the world. So that is the snapshot of protected areas in India, and the statistics is given here. See, 5.28% of the total geographical area which is covered, and the number is 998 total protected areas. The maximum is number is comprised of wildlife sanctuaries, that is 567.
Hello,
Now,
sir.
yes, yes.
Sir, I have a question.
Mm.
Sir, what is the difference between community reserve and conservation reserve?
We are coming to that. We are coming to that.
Okay.
Okay, let me discuss briefly here. The community reserves and community conservation reserves are basically recently added categories to particular areas, as I just told you. The conservation reserves are generally located in government land, whereas community reserves, they can be located in a government land, or they be present in a, most of them, they are present in private owned land. So if you feel that there is any community land, any say for instance wetland, or any patch of forest, any plantation, any woodland, which you see or perceive that it is of significant value to all of us, then you can approach the state forest department, and in consultation with the local communities and the forest department, you can recommend or you can approach the forest authorities to declare that area as a community reserve, right? So this is a common efforts of the communities for which that particular area is more significant. Like say for instance, if there is a wetland which is highly valuable to all people, communities living there, because it recharges your aquifer. No water level is basically it recharges the aquifer, and the water table is low. So you have access to water. Then fish culture, prawn culture, and then for daily use the water can be used. So it is, if it is not protected, perhaps after 10 years that wetland may disappear. A road may come and that wetland may go, right? So this is of common interest to all. So therefore, this particular wetland, which is important to all the villagers or all the communities, it can be declared as a community reserve in consultation with the local forest department. You have to basically justify it, and then the forest department signal that yes, let us go ahead with protecting this area as a community reserve. Whereas the conservation reserve is located by and large 90% of the time in a government land, and say generally a reserve forest. You have wildlife sanctuaries, you have national parks. So in between, there are sometimes reserve forest, which is basically protected forest, but the level of protection is not as good as in a wildlife sanctuary or national park. So this corridor, no particular forest patch, or what you call it, the reserve forest, is very important for migration of taxa, or say you can say movement of species, or you can say regeneration or passing of the species, visiting species from one area to another. Say in one national park where the carrying capacity has reached, so then the animals, they will move out, right? Once its carrying capacity has reached, no humans, we can live, say for instance, in particular area, 100 people, in a hectare. So if it is beyond than 100 hectare, then perhaps there will be more pressure on the land. We will not be able to live happily there. So we have to move out from that area. So same here. See, when the carrying capacity of these areas, particular areas, it reaches asymptote, or it reaches a top maximum level, then these species, they have to move out. So then the conflict starts, no? So the surrounding area, if it is a reserve forest, if it is declared as a protected area in the form of a conservation reserve, then that becomes compact. So the link between two adjacent protected areas, that is established, and therefore the conflict will also be minimized. And when the carrying capacity of one area is reached, then the species, they can also move easily, happily, without any hindrance from one area to another. So that is what a community and conservation reserves are. Now, national parks are basically those areas which carry adequate ecological, faunal, floral, and geomorphological means. Geomorphological means it's a process which includes basically the origin of species as a result of chemical, physical, and biological processes. It is a very long process. So the national park has some geomorphological utility, significance, some natural, zoological, ecological, and faunal no utility, or you can say significance. That is why it is declared as a national park. Now, they are established for the again for the purpose of propagating and developing wildlife. Wildlife doesn't mean only animals; means plants also. No, plants and animals, they are all wildlife, right? And national parks are national parks in area which is reserved strictly for the betterment of wildlife, and other activities like forestry, grazing, cultivation are not permitted in national park. Whereas in a wildlife sanctuary, these activities, they can be regulated by getting proper appropriate permission. Say, for instance, if there is drought and outside communities which are living in the fringe areas of wildlife sanctuary, so the permission can be taken by the forest department, and some harvesting of the resources, it can be permitted by the state wildlife authorities or say state forest authorities. Private ownership rights, they are not allowed in national parks. This means that in national parks, say for instance, if you are going to establish, the government is going to establish or declare a national park, then the private ownership right, those people who are exercising control on that area, that has to be settled. Because later on, once the park is declared, then the private ownership rights, they cannot be taken up later on or subsequently, but they have to be settled before it is declared as a national park, right? So that is again one prime difference or major difference between a national park and wildlife sanctuary. That in a wildlife sanctuary, the people's rights, they can be taken up subsequently. You are feeling that the government feel that this area is very important, key area for declaring a wildlife sanctuary. Otherwise, within 4 or 5 years, everything will be destroyed there. So it can be declared immediately as a wildlife sanctuary, and the people's rights, ownership rights, they can be taken up or they can be tackled subsequently. So that is not the case in the national park. It has to be done. Although people are already there in national parks, I told you that more than 1 lakh people are residing in national parks. That's a different story because they are already there. But no more people, no, they cannot, in a national park, they cannot be allowed to come in, or say if a national park is declared, their rights have to be settled and it cannot be taken. So they have to be expelled. Their rights have to be settled before it is declared. Usually, a national park has some important species, like say Dudhwa National Park in Uttar Pradesh. Swamp deer is one species. Rhinoceros, one horned rhinoceros is one flagship species, which is of concern for forest official, for government there. So therefore, that area means generally a national park has some important key element, key species,
national park is still
which highlights that species, right? Uh, they are not moving. Slides are not moving. They are not flipping.
No,
Yes, sir,
it is
slide is
moving,
moving.
sir.
Okay.
Moving,
So
sir,
it was,
moving.
Moving, sir.
I was not moving it, so that is why it was not moving. So now I have clicked it, so it is moving. No, I will be moving it when it is required. Okay. So wildlife
Excuse me,
sanctuary
sir.
again basically the same category, that it has some geomorphological, some floral, faunal, zoological significance. So that is why it is declared a wildlife sanctuary. And to assure national condition necessary to protect species, a group of species, biotic communities, or biological assemblages, physiological features of the environment. So that is the characteristic feature of a wildlife sanctuary. And as I told you, that private ownership rights, they are allowed as long as they do not interfere with the well-being of the biological values or biodiversity values within that. Once they start interfering with it, then that is not allowed. And unlike national parks, the controlled activities, human activities, they can be allowed in a wildlife sanctuary, but with the permission of the state wildlife board and the chief wildlife warden and the forest authorities. Otherwise, not. Now, the main difference we have already discussed, the main difference between national park and wildlife sanctuary, it lies in granting rights of people living inside them. So their rights that in national park the rights are not allowed, whereas in wildlife sanctuary rights can be allowed. Unlike in wildlife sanctuary, certain rights can be allowed. No rights of people are allowed in national park, right? So that we have already discussed. No livestock grazing is permitted inside national park, but in the wildlife sanctuary, the chief wildlife warden, LW, chief wildlife warden, WLS wildlife sanctuary, may regulate, control, or prohibit it, right, within a wildlife sanctuary. But in national park, no. Any removal or utilization of forest resources, whether major forest produces like say timber or minor forest produces like say fieldwood or say fodder for cattle, that basically requires recommendation of the state SBWL, State Board for Wildlife. Whereas removal or utilization of any such produce from national park requires a recommendation from the National Board for Wildlife, NBWL, National Board for Wildlife. Whereas in a sanctuary, the State Board for Wildlife, they can permit harvesting of these resources to people, not always, but in pinch periods or in crisis. Now, community conservation reserve, we already have discussed, they are declared by the state governments in any area which is owned by government, particularly the areas which are located adjacent to national park or a national park and wildlife sanctuary. So that is basically the location, and generally it is basically reserve forest. That is why I say that state government, declared by state government in land which is owned by government, because reserve forest is owned by government, but the level of protection is not as good as in protected areas or it's a wildlife sanctuary national park. So such areas can be identified, corridors which are linking to protected areas, and they can be declared as conservation reserves. And the value or significance of them is that they can, to some extent, regulate the movement of large species, large carnivores like say elephants. Elephants, if they are in one area in wildlife sanctuary one, if they are not allowed to go or they are not allowed to basically spread to surrounding areas or other suitable habitats, perhaps in 10 years the elephants will destroy that area completely, because one elephant every day it requires about 300 to 350 kg of fodder, biomass to sustain itself. So if for 10 years, if there are 200 elephants in 200 square kilometer area, perhaps in 5 years, everything will be destroyed. So conservation reserves, basically, they provide significant linkages for them to move across, to move between these protected areas, and therefore minimize the pressures also on these protected areas. So that is the significance of conservation reserves. And such declarations are made after having consultation with local communities again, because local communities, their participation is important. If the local communities are not happy, then you cannot, or government cannot do anything, right? So it is very important to bring the local communities in confidence. They are declared for the purpose of protecting landscapes, seascapes, flora, fauna, like national park and wildlife sanctuary. They also have similar conservation significance. The rights of the people living inside conservation reserve are not affected if there are some people dwelling in the corridors, in the linkages, or in the reserve forest, which is already there all over India. So that is not affected. There are 105 conservation reserves in India till date. Assam Barrage Conservation Reserve, which falls at the junction of Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh. This is one in close to Uttar Pradesh, close to Aligarh. Jhilmil Tal is another closest or say place or say conservation reserve, which has recently been declared at the junction of at the border of Uttar Pradesh and Uttarakhand, near Jhilmil Tal. So that is Tiruvardharmur Conservation Reserve was declared in February 2005. That is the oldest conservation reserve in the country in Tamil Nadu. And then communities that we have already discussed, so just a snapshot that they are declared by again state government in any private or community owned land and which are not comprised within a or they may not be located close to a national park or wildlife sanctuary, not necessarily, right? And people or the communities they volunteer to protect any significant area which is of say pivotal or say important significance for them, so they can declare that in consultation with the government. Community reserves are declared for the purpose of protecting again flora, fauna, and traditional cultural conservation values and practices which are existing there in the communities. So for continuing for their propagation, such community reserves they are declared. The rights of the people living in community reserves are not affected. Like wildlife sanctuary, national park here, the rights are not affected because people themselves are volunteering to protect that area as a community reserve. At present, there are 220 community reserve and Keshwapur Cham community reserve in Gurdaspur. This is also one of the oldest community reserve in the country. Now, other sites of conservation importance are tiger reserves, as we have discussed. There are 54. 54th is not gazetted yet. There are 53 existing till date. 54th, that is Guru Ghasidas Tiger Reserve in Chhattisgarh, which will be the fourth tiger reserve in Chhattisgarh. Any one of you from Chhattisgarh perhaps may be knowing it already. So this Guru Ghasidas Tiger Reserve will be the fourth tiger reserve in Chhattisgarh. Otherwise, 53 have been gazetted, which started from 9 tiger reserve in 1973. जो प्रोजेक्ट टाइगर आपका जब लॉन्च हुआ था 1973 में, तब जो है नियर 9 टाइगर रिजर्व थे. And this is a baby of Mrs. Indira Gandhi in consultation with other countries like say WWF International, World Wildlife Fund International. So people working on tigers, especially the forest official, they started experiencing that tigers numbers were dwindling terribly. And by 1970s, their numbers have remained less than 2,000. Which were 40,000 at the turn of the century, 20th century, 1910, 1920 till 1920. There were about 40,000 tigers in the country, which dwindled down to around 2,000 in 70s. And forest officials they started, highlighting it, and then Mrs. Indira Gandhi, the former Prime Minister or then Prime Minister, she basically started working on this in consultation with forest officials and WWF International. And in 1973, the Project Tiger, a very ambitious project of the country, it was started in 1973. And 9 protected areas, 9 tiger reserves were identified, declared under it, and then subsequently now the number has gone to 53, 54 at present. So that is, and with the conservation of this species tiger or declaring these tiger reserves, many other species indirectly they have benefited.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, may I ask a question, please?
No, yes, thank you.
Sir, as you said that from below 2000 now we have reached almost 3600. So, and at the same time, tiger reserves have increased, and our population has also increased manyfold. So, it is the human-animal conflict is bound to happen. So, is there any threshold for this protected species that up to this level a nation or a state can handle? Because in the future, if the population keeps on increasing in the same way, then the human-animal conflict will increase further.
Sir, this is the, see, from 2000, number has gone to 3067 or so. Recently in Mysore, there was a conference and the book was launched by the Prime Minister and the Environment Minister of India, where the number says 3667. This is a very slow increase. No, in 1970s, the population was less than 2000. So, in nearly, how many? 27 plus 27, nearly for 50 years, the number has it's not a tremendous, it's not a significant increase. The increase is very poor. It's in very poor state, very poor, sorry state of affairs yet. The tigers number are not increasing as we think, and they cannot increase also because it's top carnivore. It is on the top of the food chain. So tiger cannot be like human being or like say any other deer or say rats. No, it has to be low numbers because they are the top carnivores. They are on the top of the food chain and they regulate. So their numbers have to always be small. But now the pressures are more. So the number which have been added to the population from say nearly 2000 to nearly 1600 number has increased, has been added in a span of 40 to 50 years. It is not a significant increase, but the increase has to be so because it is a large carnivore and they cannot increase like other species, small mammalian species where the numbers can increase drastically and then automatically there's some spread of disease and then the natural catastrophe or the population get regulated. So there are cycles. It goes up and then go down. So these oscillations or fluctuations in the population of small species happens. But these large carnivores, they cannot behave so. So their recruitment is very slow. One or two individuals added, and the survival is also very low. And the poaching is very high poaching. In international market, the tiger body parts are sold at a very high rate. So that is the major threat to the tiger. And gang of poachers, they operate internationally. And within no span of time, they somehow lure people and then they get close to and then they kill tigers. So there are many factors, but as you are saying that the conflict may rise in terms of tiger, it may not rise. The conflict is rising or interaction between humans and tigers are increasing. The human population increasing, livestock population increasing. So these large carnivores, they are coming frequently in contact with humans and in contact with livestock. So therefore, the problem is accelerating. And elephants is more basically. So thousands of people are killed by elephants every year in India because it's a large species and more dangerous than tiger perhaps. Tiger casualties are very few, elephant casualties are far more. Because large animals and it requires large space, move around, so it comes frequently in conflict with humans. So there are many factors, which are linked to this, and especially to the large carnivores for coming in conflict or their interactions with humans increasing. Of course, the number has increased, so therefore the encounter will also increase.
Thank you. Sir, you are absolutely correct about elephants because I have seen firsthand. Actually, I was working in Bankura Purulia area of West Bengal, and there is an elephant corridor in that area. And almost every week there was some news about elephant going on rampage in a village or two. So in case of elephants, sir, that is absolutely correct.
No, this is far more, and tigers is more. Even if in a reserve or in a particular area, if you are there, you have to be more careful about the about elephant than tiger. Tiger perhaps will not touch you, but elephants, if you come in close proximity, it will not leave. No, it will just crash, and that's what it happens. And we should not underestimate the elephant. That perhaps it will not run; it will overpower within less than a kilometer. It will catch you. It will catch us. And several predictive areas it has happened when elephant come in close proximity. They will kill us. They will kill the first person who is in the proximity. Tiger may or may not, but here it is definite. Anyway,
thank you.
So that is what the tiger reserve we have discussed. It started in 1973, and currently there are 53, and the total area which is covered by tiger reserve is more than 70,000 square kilometers, 71,027 square kilometers, the total area which is covered by. So significant area has been brought under PA network of tiger reserves. And this has, as I'm telling you again, that ये tiger reserve जो है इन्होंने indirectly not only tiger but many other species they have benefited as a result of, उनको बहुत इसका फायदा और बहुत लाभ हुआ है टाइगर रिजर्व्स का कि उनको भी प्रोटेक्शन मिल गई है। जो टाइगर रिजर्व है तो हम टाइगर को इतनी प्रोटेक्ट करते हैं, इनडायरेक्टली जो दूसरे स्पीशीज है उनको भी प्रोटेक्शन मिला है और उनकी स्पीशीज की पॉपुलेशन में भी इंक्रीज नोटिस किया है बायोलॉजिस्ट ने कि टाइगर की पॉपुलेशन इंक्रीज हुई है, बाकी दूसरे स्पीशीज की भी पॉपुलेशन इंक्रीज हुई बिकॉज ऑफ द प्रोटेक्शन। Then another category is biosphere reserves. Biosphere reserves are the basically areas where humans, livestock, agriculture, forestry practices, everything is there. It is a very mosaic kind of landscapes, and biosphere reserves का area जो है बहुत ज़्यादा होता है, more than 5,000 square kilometer. Unlike a national park or tiger reserve or what you call as the wildlife sanctuary or community reserve, biosphere reserves are large spaces, large areas where humans, livestock, agriculture, then forestry activities all go hand in hand. So they are obviously conservation areas where these are the lessons. The government basically this biosphere reserve scheme was started by UNESCO in 1979, and in India under the Man and Biosphere Reserve Program, Man and Biosphere Reserve Program. Which was launched in 1984 in India, 1984, and then government, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, they started, now it is Climate Change, earlier name was, the Ministry of Forest, it was under the Agriculture Ministry, then it was Ministry of Environment and Forest, now it is Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. So in consultation with MOEF and CNC, UNESCO, in 84, they started working on the biosphere reserve, listing out, sending a team of biologists, identifying the areas, which areas can be declared as biosphere reserve. So then in 1986, the first biosphere reserve was declared in India, which is Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve in South. So that was the first biosphere reserve, and Valley of Flower, there at present there are 18 biosphere reserves. So they are huge areas, and they represent the areas which are basically species where examples of species where humans and nature they are living in harmony, they are living together. Livestock is also there, agriculture is also there, wildlife is also there, forest types are also there. So it is a classical example of coexisting human beings with nature, or in very close proximity to nature in biosphere reserves. And there are 748 biosphere reserves which are spread over 134 countries world over. The first biosphere reserve was declared somewhere in Africa in 1979. So the areas here are large, more than 5,000 square, so they are rather, you can say, significant areas for harboring any biological or say biodiversity values in the country. And they provide more long-term ecological studies in such biosphere reserves where human interference is also there. So you can, or biologists, they investigate, they can study what is the impact of human beings on the wilderness areas, because they are humans, they are livestock, they are wildlife also. So we can very well study here what are the impacts in 10 years, how the wildlife, how the forest, they are getting destroyed, or what is the impact of humans and livestock on these areas. So they are basically very good areas for studying the interactions of humans with wildlife. Generally, within protected areas, we have three zones. We have transition zone, then buffer zone, and core zone. Core zone generally is located centrally, undisturbed, where no one is allowed except the forest officials to go inside. Although for researchers, sometimes the research permit is given for going to core area also. It's one or two only, so it doesn't matter. So they can go inside and then carry out research on wildlife within the core area also. And buffer areas is generally a large area of the park or sanctuary, which comes under buffer area. Buffer means that it protects, it buffers the core area. And core area not necessarily be just one pocket. It could be 3-4 areas, small pockets spread over a large area within the national park or wildlife sanctuary. So it is not only that just there is one core; it could be more than one. Then outside, then last is basically transition zone where your administrative staff or what you call as the administrative offices, they are located in national park and wildlife sanctuary or in biosphere reserves, where you go and stay and then get permission. So director and training centers, they are located, interpretation centers, where basically the display the pamphlets and the posters and books and so on, they are displayed in transit zone in this administrative zone. So that is the general basically categorization of or you can say zonation of particular areas within national park and wildlife sanctuaries, whereas in biosphere reserves it is slightly different. They are from what you call administrative purpose. In a biosphere reserve there are 4 to 5 types of zones which have been referred or which are which into which a biosphere reserve is classified or split it. Now, the biosphere reserve, these are the basically important characteristics of biosphere reserves. It should be protected and minimally disturbed. Core area should be there, and the core area must be biographical unit, and it should be large enough to sustain viable populations. Representing all trophic levels. Trophic levels mean food chains, different food chains, and there should be involvement of local communities here. So that is why they are there, and it should have potential for preservation of traditional, tribal and rural, basically modes of living. That the tribes that are living there, so they are not disturbed and they live in harmony with the objectives of the national park or the conservation objectives of the biosphere reserves. So again, in biosphere, most of the particular areas, as we discussed, there is a core zone, buffer zone, and transition zone. But from administrative point of view, in a biosphere reserve, it can be of 5 types, where the buffer zone has been divided into 3 zones, that is forestry, tourism, and agriculture zone. In national park and wildlife sanctuaries, the tourism is carried out only in the buffer zone. Tourists are not allowed to go in the core zone. But in administrative and buffer zone, the tourists are allowed. So whenever you go to national park or sanctuary, you travel within a set route in the buffer zone, not in the, you may be going very close to the core zone, but not in the core zone. Say for instance, Corbett, if you go, Corbett National Park is Corbett, and then we have what you call Bandhavgarh, Kana National Park in Madhya Pradesh, then Gir National Park in Gujarat. They are the most visited, basically, tourist areas among national park and wildlife sanctuaries in the country every year. If you go to Corbett National Park, there is an area called Melani Forest Range. So Melani is, if you go to Melani tourist zone, we go very close to the core zone. So just along the roadside or route, you see the core zone, and you can notice the difference in the core zone and the buffer zone. Lots of tourists moving in the buffer zone, but the core zone intact, and the forests also you can distinguish in the core zone and buffer zone. So that is here the difference. So here in biosphere reserves, it can be sometimes seen divided into forestry zone, tourism zone, agriculture zone. So all the tribes, all the people who are residing within the biosphere reserve, their agricultural land, that is say agriculture zone, and tourism zone where the tourists, they go, so they are allowed to move and along set routes, definite defined routes. It is not randomly that you move anywhere in the buffer zone. There are set routes where the tourists, they are allowed to go move in. Then forestry zone, which is a trained area which is used by the forest officials, and they train people here for several basically training programs. So that is basically the forestry zone. And restoration zone is basically the zone which is slightly, in a biosphere reserve, in a particular area, because of extensive usage, if you feel, if the people feel, if the forest officials, the authorities, they feel that this area is now, destroyed, or say lot of degradation has happened in this, so that can be demarcated as a restoration zone, and for the next 5 years, no activities may be allowed in that area. So that is known as the restoration zone. And therefore, after 5 years, 6 years, whenever the biological values or biodiversity values of that area get regenerated, then again that area is brought to use. So that is what the restoration zone is within a biosphere reserve. So these are the biosphere reserves, spreading. There are 18 at present, and there are some more which have been proposed. So perhaps shortly, in a span of 5 or 10 years, there may be more areas which may be added. Of late, which have been declared as the biosphere reserve, the Panna Biosphere Reserve in Madhya Pradesh and Great Rann of Kutch in Gujarat, which have been declared. Besides these, there are World Heritage Sites also, like say VT, Victoria Terminus in Mumbai, or now the Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus, whatever it is. So that is a heritage site. And Keoladev National Park, very close to Aligarh, that is again a heritage site. Kaziranga is a heritage site. Manas is a heritage site. So these are national heritage sites. So there are about 1172 heritage sites. So heritage sites are also important from conservation point of view, because everyone has his or her own interest to protect a World Heritage Site, that it has to be preserved, because it is our culture. That area has to be preserved. Like Victoria Terminus is a forest, what you call FSI, no, not FSI, Forest Research Institute in Dehradun. That is also a heritage building. In AMU, there are some heritage buildings, so they have to be preserved. It is our culture. Otherwise, because everything is changing, evolving. So maybe, if they are not maintained properly, perhaps in another 100 years, they may vanish. They may not be there at all. So such basically areas, they have been declared as cultural heritage sites, national heritage sites, and some are mixed, like say they are national also, like say in Kanchenjunga National Park in Sikkim, that is a mixed World Heritage Site, because there are some monasteries, they are cultural, and it is a biosphere reserve, and it is a national park. So therefore it is a natural as well as cultural. So it is a mixed World Heritage Site. So that is one single mixed cultural heritage, World Heritage Site in India, Kanchenjunga National Park or Kanchenjunga Biosphere Reserve, or cultural heritage site in India. So we have 42 at present. There are 42 World Heritage Sites in India, and all these are protected by all of us, because all of us common interest that these heritage sites, they should be preserved, they should be protected, right? Similarly, sometimes you must have heard we call them as sacred groups. Sacred groups are basically nothing but these are the areas where some religious monument is located, like say any church, any mosque, or any temple is located in the forest pocket or in a area which is known as the sacred group. So there, everyone again has interest that this temple or this mosque or this church, it should be protected, because everyone go there. So because of the protection given by people, lot of regeneration of wildlife has happened in these such sites, which are known as the sacred groups. So it has been noticed that the biodiversity values are much higher in sacred groups than in the surrounding areas, because of common interest, that everyone interested to preserve that area. So they are again of interest, and they have significantly contributed to the conservation of biological diversity in country, in India and the rest of the world. So these are some of the national World Heritage Sites, like say Kaziranga in Assam, then Keoladev in Rajasthan, Manas in Assam, again Nanda Devi in in Uttarakhand, Western Ghats in Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu in Karnataka, partly Great Gwanan National Park in Himachal. They are all basically the national, cultural or World Heritage Sites. Some of the pictures, like say this is your great hornbill, which is found in the Trai ecosystem, and then in Northeast India, this is again has declined, population has declined over the last 2 decades, and this is a keystone species because it Keystone species are those species which basically help in regeneration of the ecosystems, right? It's a frugivorous bird. It feeds exclusively on fruits and it helps in regeneration of forests by spreading the seeds through its feces, in the entire landscape in the area, therefore help in spreading or help in regenerating the forest. So that is why it is known as the keystone species. And in Northeast, people basically hunt this because the huge bill, it's a huge bird. The bill is beautiful, and they basically kill this bird for getting this bill. And there's an annual festival during which they will fix this cap on the fix this bill or beak on the caps, and then they perform dances and so on. So that is one reason that has contributed to disappearance or decline in numbers of this great hornbill in the Tri ecosystem and especially the Tri ecosystem and the Northeast India. This is again a pristine ecosystem in Himalayas. You can see this is oak forest and then pine forest or cedar forest and the river. The clean water, unlike the peninsular India or we see in UP, all the rivers, major rivers, they are polluted. Today also there was news in the local newspaper in Aligarh that several rivers from Aligarh, they have disappeared. And the one which are present, the water is highly polluted, and all the insects, all the fish, all the water-dependent biodiversity wildlife that has disappeared from these areas, from these rivers, because of terrible, extensive pollution. Valley of Flower, lion-tailed macaque, which is seen in Western Ghats, is a flagship species. That such species, highlighting them showing them to people, perhaps help in preserving the biological diversity easily than bringing out some other species. So that they are known as the flagship species. Tiger, again, top carnivore, we can say it's a flagship species because protection of this helps in giving protection to many other species of flora and fauna. So that is all from our side. So thank you very much, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Very nice.
Thank you, sir.
Nice session.